I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. In fact, we're all going to learn today whether I can just sit down and build a freaking quadcopter without turning it into a 4-hour-long soldering tutorial. This is the video where I'm going to build a quad with my very own flight controller, so if you've been waiting for that, here it is. And I'm going to try and fit it into one freaking video instead of 17 parts. Stay tuned. Let's get straight to it then. Here's what's going into this build. The frame is going to be the Transframe X5. I did a review of this frame recently. I really like this frame. Every time I review a product and say something positive about it, there's always somebody who goes, "I cannot believe you actually like the product. Shill, you're getting paid." And it's like, no, I just like the product. Sorry, we have a difference of opinion there. But that's the frame we're going to use. I'd like to see how it flies. Anyway, we'll look at more of that when we're working on it. The camera is going to be the Caddx Turbo S1. I've been hearing so many good things about Caddx from people that I can't wait to actually get a chance to get one in a quad. You may recall I did the HDLRC micro build, the Zeus build, with my friend Xavier, Zav FPV, and we were going to put a Caddx camera in that, but we never actually managed to get it installed in the frame. So hopefully we'll have better luck with this one, and I'll finally get to see whether this camera lives up to some of the, well, is it hype? We'll see. ESCs will be BL Heli 32 Wraith 35 amp ESCs, and this is really nice because it'll give us a chance to try out the ESC telemetry, which of course the JBF4 supports. Video transmitter is going to be the RaceDayQuads Mach 2. Well, we've got a RaceDayQuads flight controller on here. It seems only fair to use a RaceDayQuads video transmitter. And the receiver is going to be the X4R SB, which may surprise some of you because it's hardly the latest and greatest. But, you know, it just freaking works for me. Like the RXSR is so much smaller and has a nice plug header to make it no soldering, easy to change it out if you need to or whatever you need to do. But I'm constantly getting emails from people saying, oh, my Lewis scripts don't work. And it turns out a lot of them have an RXSR. So the X4R SB is still my go-to for a lot of builds if I've got the space for it and, you know, if I've got one laying around. Finally, for the motors, I've got a really interesting experiment I'm going to do. I think you guys are going to really dig this. So I'm going to put RCX motors on the quad. And no, that's not the experiment. Hold on. I've actually been a fan of RCX for a long time, way back when I was first getting into mini quads. The state-of-the-art, what people were flying was the Sunny Sky 2203. It sounds so small today. 2300 kV motors, and they're like $20 a piece, and I kept banging them up and having to replace them, and it was too expensive. And I went to Ryan Harrell, who was still the go-to for motors and ESCs, even though it was many years ago. I said, what's a good motor that isn't too expensive? And he pointed me at My RC Mart, is where you buy them. That's their house brand is RCX Motors. And to this day, they still make motors that perform on par with like much more expensive name brands, which kind of leaves me wondering why wouldn't you just buy them? Because this is a 2306 motor. If you look at the test results, it's really decent, and it's like I think it's like $13, which yeah, not too bad. So the experiment that I'm going to do is I'm going to put this 2306 motor on my quad. And then, after I fly it a little bit, I'm going to put RCX's 2207 motor on the quad. Exact same KV, exact same quad. Only thing I'm going to change is going from 2306 to 2207. You'll see what we can do. So, very interested to see how this motor performs.
Million thoughts are spinning around in my head. My pulse holds it down, 'cause I'm almost there. Now I see you through the window and I'm walking on it.
Flight controller comes with the gummies pre-installed, so it's already soft mounted. You don't need to mount it on rubber grommets like I usually do. I'm just going to set it right down over the top of those, and there should be just barely enough threads to actually get a nut on there. I cannot find a nut. I'm going to replace it with a female standoff and then put a screw down through the top. That will mean that the standoffs are a little taller than they would have been, but I'll just stick the receiver up underneath there or something to make up for it.
Sit your chain in a line. Got the memories still popping up. Show me your heart, I'll show you mine. You go first, I rewind.
You can see that the receiver pads are on the inside of the camera pads. So I would suggest soldering up the camera header first and then moving inwards to the receiver header so you don't have to kind of fold them out of the way.
You're my soul, my heart, my beautiful. You're my first, my last, my wonderful. And I just can't seem to get enough. It's because I love you most of all.
You may notice that I'm using the UFL version of the Mach 2, not the MMCX version, despite the fact that I really love MMCX and think it's hands down better than UFL. It just happens to that's the one I grabbed off the shelf, and what the heck, I'll use it. I'm not proud. I do want to point out, if you have a UFL one and you go to change the pigtail, there is some little cement that they've put on at the factory to help hold it in place, and you need to heat that like with a soldering iron or a heat gun before you remove the pigtail. The cement, in a few cases when people just grab the pigtail and rip it off, has actually pulled the connector off the board. It's pretty strong stuff. It's there to keep it attached. So just heat it up a little bit and it'll be okay, but don't just go ripping this pigtail off if you have the UFL version. What I want to show you here is that I've left the power wire disconnected. So I've got video, ground, and TX4 for the smart audio connected. This is the 7.6 volt pad, and we've found that some people with the Mach 2, it has enough filtering that it doesn't need the additional filtering of the regulator, and it seems to perform a little bit better on higher voltage input. So I'm going to actually solder this to this ESC Plus pad to give it battery voltage instead of the 7.6 volts from the regulator. But I'm going to wait to do that until I have the ESC ready to go, so I don't have to keep one on the pad while I'm trying to solder the other. I'm just going to do them at the same time.
Alright, ooh baby, just hold tight. We're up at the moonlight, believe in the magic.
Got some 18 gauge wire left over from a previous build, and I hate to throw anything out, so I'm going to go ahead and prep the ESCs with these wires, even though it's all black. I'm just going to be really careful not to accidentally mess up my positives and my negatives. I do not recommend that anyone do this, but I'm going to do it. This is, I think it's like 30 gauge silicone wire. I have it on my Ultimate FPV Shopping List. You can get it in various, it's a combo pack of different colors. You can get it in any thickness that you want, and it's very nice to have around. Just for example, we've got these naked ESCs. They're going to need signal wires and stuff, so it's very nice for making stuff like that out of. I'm going to solder on the signal wires first. I think I might get in the way a little bit of the power wires if I didn't, so let's go ahead and do that. And I also am not going to bother with signal ground, which I know some people will object to that, and I even did a video about why signal ground could be important. But these are naked ESCs. They don't already have a ground wire. They're going to be freaking 2 centimeters wire length, something ridiculously short. I think it's going to be okay. Also, I mean, you can just see right here, we've got the signal ground, power ground. It's basically a convenience. The second pad is basically a convenience, so you don't have to solder both of your ground wires to the same pad. It makes it a little easier, but I really am skeptical that it's going to make a difference on this build, just because everything is so close together.
Baby, you got me.
So now I've got the signal wires, these are the blue ones, and the ESC negative wires. Now, since I am living dangerously and doing all of the ESC wires as black wires, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to solder the negative wires to the ESCs. I'll do all the negatives and then all the positives. I'm going to use this double-sided foam tape to hold the ESCs down. This is real handy. It is also in the tools section of my Ultimate FPV Shopping List. This is, you really just don't want to be without this at any time you're building a quad. And that's the kind of thing I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't put the top on. I would have noticed that this wire was going to kind of be right up against the standoff. Would have soldered the whole thing up and then had a real problem. The wires would be too short, etc. As it is, I can just sort of move the ESC just a little bit further out, and yeah, no problem. Now the positive and the negative wires are all wired up. I'm just going to make one pass around to double check that I haven't miswired anything, because I've used the same color for both. Not a recommended practice. I've also soldered the video transmitter to this ESC Plus pad. I'll give you a closer look at that now. The trick you use here, again, I'm straying dangerously close to a soldering tutorial, but just one little tip. Just one. I can stop anytime I want. The trick you use here is that this is a much smaller wire than this one. So this one takes a lot more heat to flow the joint. So what I did was I soldered this one down first to the pad. Then I set this smaller wire on top and just touched the iron to the joint enough that it flowed, just sort of half flowed enough that this wire stuck to the top, but didn't flow enough that this wire let go of the bottom. I'm going to call that a little bit of it's at least an intermediate technique, but that's how I do it. Now the telemetry is going to go from the telemetry pad on the ESC to RX6 on the flight controller. RX6 is the pad that would have been used for if we had a non-inverted serial protocol like Spectrum or iBus. Since we're using an inverted serial protocol on our receiver, SBus, then we're using the SBus pad and we'll use RX6 for ESD telemetry. If that all was confusing and you didn't follow it, it's all in the manual. It's all broken out exactly how to decide which pads you're going to use for what. Alright, I've got the telemetry wire coming from each ESC. The two back ESCs, I gave them a couple extra little twists just to take up some slack, and then I twisted them all together into a bundle here. And now I'm going to tin this bundle. I don't like to solder over the top of the board if I can avoid it, because there's a chance that you'll drop a blob of solder and damage it. And we're just going to solder that down to RX6. And there, it's done. It's not the prettiest. I agree. Now I've installed the motors and I'm about to solder them up, and I wanted to show you a quick little tip that I didn't invent this, but I don't remember who I saw doing it first, but you can see right here that the motor wires would get cut pretty short if I were to cut them, just to fit the ESC. So what you can do is you can just take them and give them a little loop like that. It gives you just a little bit more slack to work with if you have to do rework or anything, and it doesn't really take up that much more space. A tiny bit more weight. If you really care that much about weight, don't do it. But now the motors are all wired up. They're soldered to the ESCs. I realize that this looks a little sloppy and some of you are going to object. You can just cut them short and wire them straight. I just feel like this is a little more mistake proof. And if you see, you can really tuck them in there and then add a little bit of tape when you tape up the ESCs, so to make it look kind of neat. It's not going to look as neat as if you cut the wires short, but you're not going to be soldering extensions to a wire when you accidentally cut the wire too short. So it's your call. The next thing we need to do then is just take this little pigtail here and solder it to the video transmitter. And I am going to leave this a little bit long because I really want to, especially with the UFL connector, I really want to mount the video transmitter on the top, the underside of the top plate, so that when I take the top off to do work on the quad, I'm not pulling on the UFL, I'm pulling on these wires, which are much more robust. So I'm going to give myself plenty of room, and again, it's not going to be the absolute neatest, most trim, clean build, but it's going to be a little more maintainable, and that to me is very worth it. Whenever I get a component that has factory tinned pads on it, I always add some fresh solder of my own, just because, well, for one thing, the factory solder is probably lead free and it's garbage, so just get a little fresh flux in there, etc. A little more solder on the pads. Yeah, it's a good idea. See how shiny that is? Oops, I'll show you how to fix that in a second. So I bridge these pads. All you do is you take your iron and you just kind of swipe down the middle, and they should come apart. Didn't quite get it that time. We'll go just a little, do it one more time. There we go. The iron will take just a little bit of solder with it and fix the problem. And there you go. The video transmitter is all soldered up as well. Well, we're not quite done yet. I mean, we do have to kind of put it all together, but I think I can turn off my soldering iron. This is also the part where I would normally bind my receiver, but I've been going at this for like 3 hours, and yeah, I'm not that fast a builder. Maybe good soldering isn't fast, or maybe I'm just slow. But yeah, this is where I would bind my receiver normally, and unfortunately it looks like this frame is cut for the 3-hole style, which I don't think I even have a 3-hole camera to show you right now. Oh, but you can see that, number one, this just isn't right here, so I'm gonna have to come up with something. That's a real freaking shame, because normally I might put right here and brace it against something. There's just nothing that can hold it in place. So it's like almost 2 in the morning. I've been working on this for like 3-4 hours. I know. But I'm not going to put the buzzer on. So I'll tell you a little trick about buzzers in exchange for not putting the buzzer on. You got buzzer plus and buzzer minus. And plus is just 5 volts output, okay? Minus is what is used to switch the buzzer on and off. So you can actually swap out plus to any other 5 volt output. If you like lift the pad or something, you're fine. And in fact, if you lift the negative pad, you're screwed. If you lift the negative pad, you can't remap either, because the buzzer draws too much current for the pin on the microcontroller, the F4, and there's what's called a buffer circuit, which uses a transistor to turn the buzzer on, so the pin on the F4 isn't soaking all the current, sinking all the current. Anyway, so if you lift the negative pad, you can remap it, but you have to build your own little buffer circuit with a transistor, and it's kind of a pain in the ass. Basically, if you lift the negative pad, the negative buzzer pad, you're done. But if you lift the positive pad or anything, any other 5 volt source will do just as well. And in fact, the other thing you can do is you can use a higher voltage to make your buzzer louder. So you could wire the buzzer to, the 7.6 volt pad, or even VBAT, assuming that the buzzer is rated for it. And it'll get much louder. Now, this is not officially, I know, because I'm me and this is my board, you think I'm telling you this is okay to do. No. If you wire your buzzer to a higher voltage and then you burn something out on your board, that is not covered. We don't recommend this, but unofficially, you could probably get away with it. It's on you. Yeah. The issue is that the transistor, it can only take so much current, and if you use a higher voltage, it's going to take more current. And it also depends on the buzzer. Some buzzers are going to draw more current than others. So there's just no way for me to predict whether you're going to burn out the buzzer circuit or not. But I think the worst case condition is that you burn out the buzzer circuit and you don't have a buzzer anymore. So I don't think you'll fry the board entirely. Anyway, there you go. There's a little tip for you. You can wire your buzzer up to VBAT to make it super loud, as long as the buzzer is rated for that voltage. Now, how are we going to do this? This is going to go... I really want to see is like, Well, let's try one of these antennas from Strix. This is the Hoot antenna. I haven't even tested it, but let's give it a go. We'll put it on here. It's some new design they've got. I don't know anything about it, but it looks cute, doesn't it? So let's see. We're going to start with this and work backwards. That's a good idea. I like to have the connector, I like to have the zip tie rather, just above the SMA. You could certainly do it here. There's a nice little collar here that you could do it, but I feel like that potentially still subjects this joint to stress, whereas this way of doing it, and the only problem here is that it can slip in words because this tapers. So I really would like to get a second one like here so it can't do that, but I don't see how I'm going to be able to accomplish that. Yeah, that's not gonna work because that's gonna slip inwards. So let's move it to where that won't happen. Oh, yeah, I like that. Okay, I like that. Okay. Oh, I don't hate that. And that means we can take this. That's not the worst thing I've ever done. That's pretty bad. Okay, this is hopeless. Alright, I don't have a good solution for that right now. I don't have a good solution. I'm gonna leave it. I don't, this is not good. But I'm not sure what is good. And there it is. There is the finished build. But obviously there's a lot to do in the computer with the programming and the ESCs and all the other stuff, but that's a topic for another day. In fact, if you want to watch the ultimate Betaflight configuration guide, I've got a video about how to set up Betaflight, and of course I've got a manual that I wrote for this specific flight controller to take you through all the things that you would need to do to get this in the air. Well, at least the flight controller parts, not the BLHeli part. That I should make that video next. Huh. Well, anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Happy flying.